Hello, my name is Dana Walker, and I wanted to analyze a policy. And that policy is the Americans with Disabilities Act, also called ADA. In 1986, the National Council on Disability had recommended enactment of an Americans with Disabilities Act and drafted the first version of this bill that was introduced to the House and the Senate in 1988. The final version of this bill was signed into law on July 26, 1990, by President George H.W. Bush. It was later amended in 2008 and signed by President George W. Bush, with changes that took effect as of January 1st, 2009. The main purpose of the law was to ensure that people with disabilities had the same opportunities and rights as everyone else. This act is a civil rights law that would prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and other public and private places that are open to the general public. And a description of the problem that the policy was designed to correct. One area would be employment. This law was designed to help those with disabilities assess the same employment opportunities and benefits available to people without disabilities. And it also prohibited discrimination that may include, amongst other things, firing or refusing to hire someone based on a real or perceived disability, segregation, and harassment based on the disability. Another area that it covered was state and local government, and this prohibited discrimination towards individuals that qualify with disabilities in all programs, activities, and services of public entities. And another area would be non-discrimination on the basis of disability by public accommodations and in commercial facilities. And this prohibited private places of public accommodations from discriminating against individuals with disabilities. Public accommodations include most places of lodging, such as inns and hotels, recreation, transportation, education, and dining, along with stores, care providers, and places of public display. Another area would be telecommunications. This required telephone and internet companies to provide a nationwide system of interstate and intrastate telecommunications relay services that allowed individuals with hearing and speech disabilities to communicate over the telephone. And the last area would be miscellaneous benefits. And this provided provisions related to the ADA as a whole, including its relationship to other laws, state immunity, its impact on insurance providers and benefits, and prohibition against retaliation and coercion, illegal use of drugs, and attorney's fees. A description of the scope of the problem would be that there was a need for those with disabilities to have access to public accommodations, retail and commercial establishments, just as those who did not have a disability. And this problem affects more than 50 million Americans all across the United States. This issue has the potential to affect anyone that may require any type of accommodations to assist them to gain the same access to public places. The impact on Houston has been that the government has been held accountable to comply with the ADA. And some of the accommodations that the city of Houston had to make sure happened was to provide street corners that had curb cutouts, more public buses and trains, with automatic lifts, automatic doors on public buildings as well. And why a policy solution is necessary to address the problem? That's because many with disabilities were not given the same accessibility to public places as those that did not have a disability. And a goal of the policy was to give those with disabilities the same rights as those that were not deemed disabled. The latent goals were to promote employment for those with disabilities and not allow discrimination. The benefits of the policy was to give equal opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for those with disabilities. And according to the Americans with Disability Acts, an individual with a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, or has a record of such impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. On September 25th, 2008, President George W. Bush signed the ADA Amendment Act of 2008, which was called the ADAAA, into law. And this amendment broadened the definition of disability, therefore extending the ADA's protection to a greater number of people. And the services that are delivered under this enactment is the ability to access public places, gain employment, effective communication tools for those that are deaf and blind, and may include but not limited to programs, services, and activities that are given to others as well. An aspect of the policy that needs to be changed, well, there are some buildings that were in place before the act, and some of these are deemed historical, so they do not fall under the same guidelines as a new building, or a building that's not historical may fall under, so they may not have some of the same accommodations that the newer buildings have. And another issue is that some of those with disabilities feel that the biggest disappointment remains the lack of progress by individuals with disabilities towards reaching goals of economic independence vis-a-vis equal employment opportunity. And also, this policy is funded by the federal and local government.